Driving alone late at night can be peaceful until something unexpected appears on the road. These stories come from people who experienced something disturbing while traveling on dark highways far from help. Story 1. I had been driving for 3 hours when the sky finally gave up the gray it had held all day and turned a bruised violet. The highway stretched ahead like a black river, bordered by scrub that seemed to lean in, listening. I was alone in the 1998 Chevrolet, my mother's old sedan, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender cleaner, carrying a single heavy suitcase and a stack of paper maps that I refused to replace with GPS. It was the kind of night you could hear your own thoughts. The radio crackled static, then a low country song drifted through the speakers. I turned the volume down, letting the hum of the engine and the occasional sigh of tires on the asphalt fill the space. Around mile marker 62, the fuel gauge flickered to E. I glanced at the empty road ahead. The nearest gas station was a 30-minute stretch back toward town. I eased off the accelerator, the car's light wobbling as I coasted toward a rusted pull-off. A single pale lamppost marked the turnout, casting a thin circle of amber onto the asphalt. I turned the engine off and sat there, listening. It was then I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the turnout, half lit by the lamp. He was a man in a faded denim jacket, his hands tucked deep into his pockets, a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the car as if waiting for an invitation. A flicker of unease passed through me, but the thought of being stranded in the dark outweighed any instinct to stay inside. I unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like fresh blood. "Evening," I called, trying to sound casual. "Did you see a station around here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, the gravel crunching under his boots. I could see his face now, pale, angular, eyes dark and unblinking. He lifted a hand, palm up, and in it rested a small, tarnished key. "You can use this," he said, his voice flat, almost mechanical. "It opens the pump. It's been here a while." My stomach tightened. I glanced at the gas gauge, still empty. The key glinted absurdly in the weak light. I could have told myself it was a prank, a stranger's odd kindness on an empty highway. But something about the way his fingers twitched, the way his eyes never left my car, made the hair on my arms rise. I closed the door, the latch clicking shut with a finality that sounded like a lock. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll be fine. I just need to get to the next town." He didn't move. He just stood there, unblinking, as if the darkness itself had taken shape in his silhouette. I could feel the car's old heater sputtering, a soft whine filling the cabin. The night seemed to grow thicker, the wind whispering through the scrub like a warning. When I finally dared to put the car in gear, the engine coughed to life. I pulled away, the taillights cutting through the gloom, and glanced into the rearview mirror. The man was gone. The spot where he had stood was now empty, the gravel undisturbed, the lamppost still casting its thin circle. A few miles later, I saw the gas station, a dilapidated brick building with flickering neon that read, "Open." I pulled in, the pump's nozzle buzzing like a nervous insect. As I filled the tank, the attendant, a middle-aged woman with a tired smile, handed me a receipt. "Long night," she said. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, grateful for the normalcy. Then I realized the receipt was blank, the paper smooth and cold. On the back, in faint ink, was a single word: "Thank you." I stared at it, heart thudding, and heard the faint echo of a baseball cap moving in the wind far down the empty highway. Story 2. The night was the kind of black that seemed to swallow even the headlights of my truck, turning the highway into a thin, molten ribbon of light that stretched into nothing. I'd been driving for 10 hours, the miles ticking off on the odometer like a slow, unhurried countdown. The dashboard clock read 2:13 a.m. The radio was off. the only sound the steady thrum of the engine and the occasional hiss of wind over the tires. I'd taken this route 100 times, but something about the way the trees leaned in on either side, like a curtain about to be drawn, made the familiar feel foreign. I glanced at the empty passenger seat, half expecting my sister's voice to echo from somewhere, a joke about ghosts on the interstate. She'd slept through the night in the motel we'd booked 2 towns over. I was alone, a thin line of fuel left in the tank, and a gnawing fatigue pressing at my eyes. A flicker of movement on the shoulder made my hands tighten on the wheel. I slowed, squinting through the dimness. A figure, a woman, stood at the edge of the road, her silhouette framed by the weak glow of a distant mile marker. She was dressed in a tattered coat, the kind you'd see in a thrift store, and her hair hung in limp strands over her face. I didn't see her eyes, but the way she held herself felt waiting. Instinctively, I pulled over. The engine sputtered, a low whine, and the world fell quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing. I rolled down the window just enough to speak, my voice trembling more than I'd like to admit. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride?" She didn't answer. The wind brushed past her, lifting the hem of her coat like a ghost's veil. For a moment, the darkness seemed to thicken around her, and I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, the same one I'd felt when the night air turns cold before a storm. I hesitated, then reached for the door handle. The metal was cold, as if it had been left outside for days. The woman stepped forward. Her shoes made no sound on the asphalt, and the hem of her coat swayed as if she were walking on water. When she turned toward the truck, the faintest outline of a face became visible. Hollow eyes, skin the color of ash, and a mouth that seemed to be held open in a silent scream. My heart slammed against my ribs. I slammed the door shut, the clack of the latch echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. The woman's hand, pale, almost translucent, slammed against the glass, leaving a smear of something dark that ran like ink across the windshield. I could hear it whisper, a low, guttural murmur that rose with the wind. "Don't go." I fumbled for the ignition, the engine coughing back to life, as if it too were reluctant to move. I slammed the truck forward, the tires screaming as they ripped through the wet asphalt. The woman didn't follow. Instead, she stood still, her outline shimmering like heat haze. As I passed, a gust of wind knocked the rearview mirror free, and it shattered, scattering a spray of glass across the cabin. For a split second, I thought I saw a face reflected in the broken glass. A face that wasn't mine, eyes wide with an ancient, pleading terror. I didn't look back. I drove until the highway gave way to the glow of a town's streetlights, my hands trembling over the wheel, my heart a frantic drum. When I finally stopped at a 24-hour diner, I stepped out into the fluorescent buzz, the night air smelling of cheap coffee and diesel. I turned to glance back at the parking lot. The shoulder was empty, the highway a black ribbon again. No sign of the woman, no evidence of the smear on the glass. I ordered a coffee, my fingers wrapped around the warm mug, as if it could anchor me to reality. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, looked at me and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, but the tremor in my voice gave me away. "Just a bad night," I whispered, and as I stared into the dark window, my reflection stared back, eyes that weren't quite my own, lingering a moment longer than they should.